Hello, this is Nicola in the sewing room with yarn. That sounds like something out of Clue or Cluedo, doesn't it? Nicola with the crochet hook in the sewing room. Okay, we've already gone off track, but let's get back on and talk about crochet granny squares. I am crocheting lots of squares right now to make some granny square pants or trousers. And rather than follow a pattern for the granny squares, I'm just doing it my favorite way. And I thought I'd show you how I make my granny squares. This is not the only way to do it. You certainly don't have to do it the same way I do, but I like the way these turn out. I like that the stitches are pretty close together. There's not extra gaps in between the clusters. And I thought I would just do a real-time crochet square with you today. Here are some of the ones that I've already made. Because I'm using stash, they may not look that well planned. I did not buy extra yarn for this. I'm going to make one similar to this today. And what I have done basically is follow a pattern of light, dark, and then black. I don't know whether I'm going to have enough black for the 56 squares that I need to make. If not, I'll go to grey for the outside round. So yes, lots of beautiful colours. Lots of beautiful granny squares, if you're a granny square addict like me. Apologies if I keep knocking the camera. I am trying a new setup to get a good view today. So, things you need, apart from yarn. Crochet hook. I'm using my Knit Pro Waves 5.5mm. I bought an entire range of these a few years ago, from the smallest to the largest. I just love them. They're really comfortable to use. I have my little snips. I would never have bought one of these for myself, but my friend gave me these one Christmas, and I am finding them invaluable because they're so nice and sharp and easy to carry around with you if you're going out with your project. And a blunt tipped darning needle for weaving in those pesky ends at the end. As I said, this is not going to be a speeded up version of the video. Feel free to fast forward if you need to, because I am going to film the whole process and leave it all in so that you can see how I do it. My method of choice for the start is to use a magic ring. A lot of people will use a slip knot and then chain a few stitches and join them into a circle with a slip stitch. I like a magic ring. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. This is just the way I do it, which is possibly a little clumsy, but it works for me. And then I start with 3 chains. And then I do 2 double crochets. And then 2 chains. And then a cluster of 3 double crochets. If you're not familiar with a double crochet, it's just yarn over, pull a loop through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. That's all there is to it. Crochet is all wraps and loops. Two more chain. Each time you do 2 chain, that's a corner. Another group of 3. Another 2 chain. It's at this point where I start snugging up my magic ring. This is what's nice about the magic ring. You can tighten it up so you don't end up with a gaping hole in the center. I mean, if you use the chain 4, whatever, and join into a ring and start from there, You can always use your yarn tail to cinch it up later on. Not the end of the world. What I have seen a lot of people do is complain about how their magic ring comes apart in the wash. I always finish this off with a knot and then weaving in the tails because I don't expect it to hold. Okay, so got to the end of our clusters of 3, and now I'm going to go into my 3rd chain here. Some people will just go in there because it's easy, and I have done that in the past. I still do sometimes. Just go right into the front of the stitch. The prettier way, in my opinion, is to finagle the hook in to the top 2 loops of your chain. So sometimes you have to sort of turn it around and get it in there like that. Yes, it's fiddly, but I think it's worth it. So we're slip stitching into that chain, and then I chain 1 and cut my yarn for the next round. And you have a teeny square. Isn't that cute? Now what also you can do is, if you're making hundreds of these things, you can do lots and lots and lots of round ones. You can have lots and lots of teeny squares in different colors, do them all at the same time. Then you can take your next color and you can do lots and lots of round 2s. And that's a bit like chain piecing in quilting, right? It feels like it speeds things up. It feels like it's a bit more efficient. Well, I'm not going for efficiency here today, so we're doing it one at a time. All right, so the way I like to start my next round, rather than just pull the yarn through and end up with a sloppy thing, is I like to put a slip knot on my hook, which of course I just did so automatically, and I don't know if you saw how I did it, but I just wrap it like that and pull through like that. Now that's basically how I do my magic ring. So if I was doing a magic ring, I would just leave it loose, pick up my yarn and start. But because I'm doing a slip knot, I just tighten it up. It's the exact same technique, just one's loose and one's tight. Again, so many different ways of doing that. So we're going to start the next round. I like to move away from where these tails are, because that way I'm not weaving them all in on the same corner of my square. I use a standing double crochet, so I have to make sure my finger is on this stitch, because otherwise it's going to swivel around the hook. So I do my yarn over, and then I go into the space, pull up a loop, still holding on to that original slip knot, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. Sometimes it's easier to grab that little tail and pull it through. So now I have a standing stitch, and what I like about this, firstly, the yarn is anchored with a slip knot, makes it safer for weaving in your tails later on, and secondly, you don't have a chain 3. On the first round I had a chain 3 right here, and it looks slightly different from all the double crochets. An experienced eye can pick out where all the chain 3s are in a round of crochet. So I like to start with a standing double crochet because it's an actual stitch and it looks the same as all the others. So I've done a cluster of 3 and 2 chain for my first corner, and now I'm going to do another cluster of 3 in the same place. The yarn I'm using is just generic acrylic worsted weight yarn. Mostly from Michael's, I think. Left over from other projects many moons ago. Okay, so we have one corner, and I'm going to just do the same in all of the other corners. And I think I've pulled this yarn from the outside of my skein, so it's going to be hanging up on me. I do like to pull from the center where possible, as it does run more smoothly. There's my second corner done. 3 double crochets, 2 chain, 3 double crochets, and then we're going to skip to the next corner. Another 3. Yep, I'm making this hard on myself here with this yarn. There it goes onto the floor. This is a warts and all crochet tutorial. Real life. Including checking to make sure the microphone hasn't run out of battery. There you go, 4 corners worked. And then I just need to go into the top of the first double crochet, the standing double crochet right there. I like to go under the top 2 loops, make sure it's nice and secure, and chain 1 to finish and snip the yarn. As I was making these crochet granny squares for my wonderful, colourful pants to be, I was thinking of maybe doing a tutorial for this. And it was on the back burner, and then someone left a comment on my last vlog and said they'd love to see how I make my granny squares. And I thought, right, today's the day. All right, I have put a slip knot on my hook for colour number 3. We're going to do a standing stitch again. And 3 double crochets. Once you've done the first maybe 3 rounds, you've got it down. And then every other round is the same after that. You just have an extra cluster to do along each straight edge. Maybe this is why granny squares are so popular. They're just absolutely mindless once you get started. There's my first corner. A cluster of 3 into that space there. Another thing that's great about granny squares is they are good for beginners because you're working into a big space. You're not trying to fiddle your hook into a stitch and figure out where the heck it's supposed to go. It's going into a space that's really obvious. You're also starting with just a little bit in the middle, and you're not having to work into a whole line of fiddly, annoying chains. How many of us have looked at a pattern for something like a blanket and it says chain 350, work back into every single one? Oh joy. So there's one corner, there's a cluster into the straight, and another corner, and then into here. One of the more challenging parts of crochet is figuring out the yarn tensioning, really. It's not learning the stitches. It's working out how you want to hold the hook that works for you and how you want to hold the yarn. I've seen so many ways of doing it. With the hook holding, it's usually either what they call the knife grip, like I do, or the pencil grip, which a lot of other people do. I never did figure out how to do it that way. And for holding the yarn, some people use the yarn. Okay, we'll leave that fluff in, just, because this is real life. What I was going to say is some people hold the yarn in the same hand as the hook and almost throw it like knitting. Other people have this finger in the air. Some people have this finger in the air. Some people have it almost, they're almost like just picking the yarn up from really low down. There are so many ways of doing it, and the beauty of it is, as long as you're creating the stitches and you like the result, there's no really wrong way. What I would say when you're starting out is to experiment, try out a few different ways of doing things. And if you get stuck, Ravelry is such a great resource. If you're not on Ravelry.com and you're a yarn crafter, get over there, get yourself an account, it's free. Forums for help, thousands and thousands of free patterns. And you can log your projects. I've been logging my projects, I think, since like 2007. Got 850 or more than that on there now. And it's lovely to have a record so you can look back on what patterns you made, what yarn you used. Sometimes you want to go back and make the same thing again and you want to see how you did it. Okay, so we're getting to the end of round number 3. I think that's looking really pretty. I know granny squares are not for everybody, but I love them. There you go, slip stitch to the top of the first stitch and chain 1 and cut. Pull out your tail. We'll deal with those tails later on. Now this ball of yarn is going to give me hassle, I think. I wound it into a tight ball last night, a tight-ish ball, because the skein was getting so loosey-goosey, it was driving me crazy. Okay, slip knot on the hook. 4th round. Let's go to a different corner. There we go. Remember to hold that. If you don't hold it, it's just going to go so wiggling around and get away from you. You have to be the boss of your yarn. Okay. 3 double crochets, 2 chain, 3 double crochets, again a cluster of 3 in the next space, and we have another space to put 3 in here. And then a corner. So I was watching Mikey of the Crochet Crowd crocheting on a video the other day. He's been doing YouTube tutorials for donkey's years. And I noticed he was crocheting without touching the hook at all. He was basically just doing this and making his stitch, and there was no right index finger involved at all. And his stitches were quite loose, and maybe this is why I tend to crochet more tightly, because what I like to do is put my finger on here and then do my wrap and then pull through and then pull through. It's sort of controlling how far the yarn can go. There's a resource somewhere, I don't know if I can find it again, but I think it's called Yankers, Riders and Lifters. So some people are yankers, some people pull their loop really loose up high and make a really tall stitch, and their row gauge then is quite large. Some people, now let me see, that was a lifter. So hang on, this is probably a lifter, someone who pulls up the loop really high. The yankers, I think, are the people who do it really tight. So they'll put their hook through and they'll stay really low and close to their work and a really tight tension and do a really short stitch. And a rider is one who just keeps it sort of just above the row below, a nice moderate sort of tension, and then form your stitch. And I think I'm in the sort of more moderate range. It's important to adopt or develop a relaxed technique for yourself. Because if you're going to make 11 billion granny squares for a blanket, say, you don't want to give yourself carpal tunnel problems. Regardless of your technique, of course, it's always important to take regular breaks. Do as I say, not as I do. In fact, I think that's why it's good to be multi-craft dual, because if you do a couple of different hobbies, it will tax different muscles and ligaments in your hands, maybe avoid some of the more dire repetitive strain injuries. When I broke my wrist in 2018 when I was snowboarding, I have to say I was not a good patient because I did not want to be sitting there without yarn in my hand. So even though I had a cast on, I figured out a way to crochet. I crocheted left-handed for a while, just so I can do it and not get frustrated. I also was writing left-handed. That was messy. I think you can see how this would become a very repetitive, relaxing activity. Once you're confident of what you're doing, it's great Netflix watching. It's great for Netflix watching because you can do it without looking for a lot of the time. And you feel like you're being productive at the same time as you're watching TV. Round 4 is done. What I haven't mentioned yet is how differently people do make their granny squares. What you'll see is I'm doing two chains on my corners, and I'm doing no chains in between my clusters because I like the snugged up look of it. It really depends a lot on your tension. As long as your granny square is lying flat, you're probably doing it right. Some people like to put 3 chains here. They like to put an extra chain in between their clusters. Really, you can do any combination as long as you're happy with it and it's sitting flat and it looks good. One of the things I love about granny squares with a black border is they look like stained glass. There is nothing stopping you from using whatever colours you like. You could use a different colour for every round if you wanted to. And of course, you don't have to make lots of small granny squares. I've made a number of blankets where I just kept on going and going and going. And one of them turned out to be about 8 feet square. And I've put it on my bed for the winter because sometimes the IKEA winter duvet just isn't enough. I do live in Canada after all. There's just something so pleasing about sleeping under something you made. It's a weekend. The family's all home. If you hear any knocks, bangs, or whatever, it's because I share my house with my husband and 3 adult sons. So I'd love to hear your comments or read your comments about whether you can crochet already or whether you're just learning or you want to learn. Tell me who taught you or if you taught yourself. It's funny how I don't really have a memory of learning, but I'm 99% sure that I learned from my boyfriend's mum when I was around 18. And she had granny square blankets on the couch at home. And she will have taught me just how to crochet a granny square. And I remember what I first made out of crochet. No, not anymore. That was a long time ago after all. I'm 61 now, so that was a very long time ago. And I didn't crochet anything for a very, very long time after that. It wasn't really till I came to Canada and I had my family and got back into yarn crafts that I got back into crochet. And with the advent of Ravelry, of course, so much inspiration there with all the patterns and people talking about what they're making and the techniques they've found out or invented. Just so amazing. This is not sponsored, this video, by Ravelry, by the way. I just love it. Okay, so we've done our very last stitch. Now I just need to slip stitch into there. That's basically it. And of course, with 5 colours of yarn, I have 10 tails to weave in. This is the part that a lot of people loathe with a vengeance. I don't mind doing it, especially if I have a good movie to watch. If you're watching a good movie or a series on Netflix or somewhere, it just gets done real quick. So I always start with my magic ring, and as I say, I do like to add a sort of knot in there because this is just a loop of yarn that's not anchored really in any way, and I wouldn't trust it without doing some sort of knot. So I just go under a couple of the strands of the stitches around where that tail's coming out, and then just loop back and make a sort of fairly unobtrusive knot. These squares are going to be used for a garment, so no one's going to see the back of them anyway. And then I just go under my stitches in one direction, and then I always double back. If you really want to be secure, you can double back twice. So the join is sort of hidden under here. So rather than just go straight in and double back on it, I like to pop it under there, just to loop it around something so that when I put it back through here, it doesn't undo itself. I know what I'm doing. I guess I do. So I like to go through there. And then you can either just go over that first loop and double back, which is a bit more visible, or you can just go through the same color loop and then go back. There's lots of places to hide a tail of yarn. Crochet stitches are quite thick and dense compared to a knit stitch, but there's usually more places to hide your tails. I have never had anything unravel on me in all these years of crocheting. I guess I must be doing something right. First time you put something in the washing machine, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, just in case. But it's never been a problem. I try not to weave my tails in the same place as another tail. So I just put that tail under this set of stitches here. So I'm going to take this next one across to the next cluster there and put it in here. I strongly recommend that if you are making a lot of motifs like this, to weave your ends in as you go. All of these here, whoops, sorry about knocking that tripod there. I've made about 22 of these now, and I have woven in as I have gone along, because it's a lot more of a daunting task if you wait till the end to weave in all your tails. I haven't decided how I'm going to join all my squares for these trousers yet. There's a lot of ideas online for different ways of doing that. So when I get to that stage, I'll be making sure to show you how I did it on my vlog. Nearly there. Doesn't take that long, really. So when you crochet or you knit and you have all these little tails, what do you do with them? Do you just toss them in the bin? Or do you save them for later? Some people keep every single little scrap, which is a good way to keep it out of landfill. So that's not a bad thing. And if you make little stuffies like amigurumi or something like that, you can always use them for stuffing those things instead of using the polyester fill. I have to confess, these tails are going in the bin. All right. One last double check to make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, I think we're good. As you can see, the back looks pretty neat. Just a couple of dots of colour or whatever. I don't like to snip my tails too short. I'd rather have a little bit of tail sticking out on the back than have it unravel on me. But I think those are all nicely secure now. And there we have it, a finished granny square. And there you have it. A wonderfully retro granny square. What's your opinion of granny squares? Tacky or awesome? I think they're awesome. Awesomely tacky sometimes, but awesome. Hope you enjoyed watching me crochet today. Do let me have your comments underneath the video. Give me a like if you want. And I'll be back with something else fun very soon. Bye for now.